Once upon a time, far away from here, in a little valley nestled between two hills, there were 3 goats. They were brothers, and everyone knew them as the 3 Billy Goats Gruff. Their names were Little Billy Goat Gruff, Middle Billy Goat Gruff, and Big Billy Goat Gruff. They had a simple and happy life. They spent their days frolicking in the meadow, munching on the sweet green grass, and playing by the crystal clear river that separated the 2 sides of the valley. The valley was beautiful, and they were very happy there. But as time went by, they realised that they had a big problem. The sweet green grass that they loved so much was almost gone on their side of the valley. The goats had eaten nearly all of it, and their meadow was starting to look patchy and bare. One day, Little Billy Goat Gruff looked up from munching on his grassy breakfast, and he saw that the meadow across the river was filled with thick, juicy green grass.
"Brothers," he said, "have you ever noticed how absolutely delicious that grass looks over there?"
Middle Billy Goat Gruff said, "Wowzers, I've never seen such scrumptious looking grass. But, little brother, there's one big problem. We have to cross the river, and we can't swim."
"What about that?"
said Little Billy Goat Gruff, pointing at a nearby wooden bridge.
"No one crosses the bridge," said Big Billy Goat Gruff. "There is a troll under there, and he's big and mean, and he eats goats like us for breakfast."
His brothers gasped.
"And he's smelly too,"
Big Billy Goat Gruff added, and his brothers gasped again. Big Billy Goat Gruff was absolutely right. The troll was big, and he was mean, and he did eat goats for breakfast. His skin was green and warty, his teeth yellow and crooked, and his nose was spotty and snotty. He was grumpy and lumpy, and what he hated more than anything was the thought of anyone crossing over his bridge.
"All I want is a bit of peace and quiet," the troll would say. "Is that so much to ask?"
He just happened to think that goats were the most delicious thing in the whole wide world, and that made him extra dangerous. But the 3 Billy Goats Gruff were fast running out of food in their meadow, and they were starting to get rumbly tummies. They needed a plan. They put their heads together and they thought hard about what they could do.
"We could sail across,"
Little Billy Goat Gruff suggested.
"We don't have a boat,"
Middle Billy Goat Gruff said.
"Could we try sneaking over the bridge at night?"
Little Billy Goat Gruff said.
"Our feet would make too much noise on the wooden planks,"
Middle Billy Goat Gruff replied.
"The troll would hear us with his great big ears and gobble us right up."
"What if we built another bridge?"
Little Billy Goat Gruff said.
"We're goats," Big Billy Goat Gruff said. "We can't build anything."
"Good point," Little Billy Goat Gruff said. They kept thinking until they came up with the perfect plan. The next day, Little Billy Goat Gruff trotted up to the bridge. His hooves made a trip-trap sound as he stepped onto the wooden planks. No sooner had he set his foot on the bridge, the troll jumped up from underneath it to block his path.
"Who's that trip-trapping over my bridge?"
roared the troll, his horrible voice echoing through the valley.
"Nothing to worry about,"
Little Billy Goat Gruff said as bravely as he could.
"It's only me, Little Billy Goat Gruff. I'm just popping over to the other side."
"I don't think so. I'm gonna gobble you up,"
bellowed the troll, licking his lips.
"Well, you could,"
said Little Billy Goat Gruff.
"but I don't think I'd make a very good meal. I'm much too tiny."
The troll looked confused. He got confused quite a lot. Then the Little Billy Goat Gruff continued.
"Why don't you wait for my brother, Middle Billy Goat Gruff? He's much bigger and tastier than me."
The troll thought for a moment and then stepped aside, smiling.
"Very well,"
he said.
"But hurry up and get off my bridge,"
he added with a snarl. And with that, Little Billy Goat Gruff scampered across the bridge and began to munch on the delicious green grass on the other side. Next, it was Middle Billy Goat Gruff's turn to cross the bridge. His hooves made a louder trip-trap sound as he stepped onto the wooden planks. Again, the troll appeared.
"Who's that trip-trapping over my bridge?"
roared the troll.
"It's only me, Middle Billy Goat Gruff. No big deal,"
said the goat in his medium-sized voice, trying to be brave.
I'm just popping over to the other side to join my brother.
I do not think so. I'm going to gobble you up,
bellowed the troll, showing his horrible yellow teeth.
Well, you could,
said Middle Billy Goat Gruff.
But the thing is, I'm not that big, and I wouldn't be a very good meal, especially for someone as big and strong as you. Wait for my brother, Big Billy Goat Gruff. Now he would fill you up, that's for sure.
The troll licked his lips and stepped aside to let the goat pass.
Very well, he said. Now hurry up and get off my bridge.
Middle Billy Goat Gruff trotted across the bridge and joined his little brother on the other side and began munching through the lush, juicy grass. Finally, it was Big Billy Goat Gruff's turn to cross the bridge. His hooves made a very loud trip-trap sound as he stepped onto the wooden planks. The troll, expecting a big meal, jumped up immediately.
Who's that trip-trapping over my bridge?
Roared the troll, his mouth watering.
It's me, Big Billy Goat Gruff,
said the goat in his biggest, deepest voice.
At last,
said the troll.
I've been waiting for you, Big Billy Goat Gruff. You look very big and very delicious, and I simply can't wait to gobble you up.
The troll bared his horrible yellow teeth. Big Billy Goat Gruff was not scared of the troll. He had big, strong horns, and he was mighty brave.
Bring it on, you spotty, snotty, lumpy, grumpy beast, he said boldly.
The troll was a bit taken aback. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, but he was also very hungry, and he decided to take Big Billy Goat Gruff on. The troll lunged at Big Billy Goat Gruff, but the big goat was ready. He lowered his head, pointed his horns at the troll, and charged. He butted into the troll with such enormous force that the troll was thrown backwards off the bridge and into the river, floating away downstream, never to be seen in the valley again. With the troll gone, Big Billy Goat Gruff skipped lightly across the bridge and joined his brothers in the lush green meadow. The three goats were over the moon to be back together again and to finally be in the beautiful green meadow, eating the luscious, scrumptious and plentiful grass. They spent the rest of their days happily grazing and frolicking in their new home. And with the troll finally gone, they could cross the bridge whenever they wanted without any fear. And they lived happily ever after. What about the troll, I hear you ask? Well, a lot of people don't know this, but he floated down the river, away from the valley and out to sea. After weeks of floating about, he eventually washed up on a desert island, a quiet and peaceful place with absolutely no one else around. It was paradise for the troll. He found that coconuts were even more delicious than goats, and he spent the rest of his days guarding his beautiful island home, which was easy because no one ever found it. He may even be there still. The Gingerbread Man. Once upon a time there was an old woman. Her husband was gone, and her children were all grown up with families of their own, and so the old woman lived alone, apart from her chickens, of course, and she was desperately lonely. One day, to cheer herself up, she decided to make some gingerbread. She carefully measured the ingredients and moulded the dough lovingly into the shape of a little man, and once he was baked, she decorated him with icing and sweeties so that he had a smiling mouth and smart buttons down his front. He looked very nice. The old woman looked at him and thought, he looks almost too good to eat. Nonetheless, she picked him up and raised him to her lips to take a bite, when suddenly he yelled,
"Old woman, what are you doing?"
She dropped the gingerbread man in surprise, and he scurried out the door, laughing and shouting,
"Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the Gingerbread Man."
The gingerbread man ran down the garden path on his little gingerbread legs, faster than you would think a small biscuit could run. Suddenly, the old woman's chickens were hot on his heels, squawking and pecking at him. He yelped in surprise and ran even faster, jumping over the garden gate in one giant leap, leaving the chickens behind, clucking indignantly. He cackled to himself and called,
"Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the Gingerbread Man."
He ran down the lane and turned the corner, and there, in front of him, was a cat, fluffy and white, a blue collar around her neck and a little silver bell tinkling softly against her chest. The cat's face was scrunched up into a permanent scowl, and she hissed at the gingerbread man before giving chase. The gingerbread man yelped and quickened his pace. Usually, cats are quite fast. By rights, the gingerbread man shouldn't have stood a chance, but this particular cat could usually be found curled up on a warm lap or eating smoked salmon pâté and cream. So she was actually quite slow, and she ran out of puff rather quickly. The gingerbread man outpaced her and left her panting on the side of the road. He laughed a mocking laugh and called out,
Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the Gingerbread Man.
Soon he came to a field that ran alongside a riverbank where all was quiet, and he decided to rest a while. The river was wide and slow, flowing lazily past, dragonflies and water boatmen making little ripples on the surface. But no matter how gentle the current was, the gingerbread man could not swim, and he knew that if he got wet, he would dissolve away into the river and be gone forever. Just as he was pondering what he should do, a shadow fell over him. The gingerbread man looked up, and there was a huge brown cow standing over him, licking her lips. The gingerbread man froze, his mouth gaping open in fear, and the cow leaned down towards him, her big pink tongue curling out of her mouth, ready to snap him up. The gingerbread man finally found his feet, and he ran off down the riverbank. The cow gave chase, and the gingerbread man was horrified to find that she was actually quite fast. He looked this way and that for an escape, but it was the field or the river, and either way he was doomed. Up ahead, he saw a fox taking a drink from the river.
Fox!
The gingerbread man called out. The fox looked up from the river and cocked his head. This was something new. He'd been around a while, this fox, and he thought he'd seen everything. But a biscuit come to life being chased by a farm animal. He'd never seen anything like this before.
Fox! Help me across the river!
The gingerbread man demanded as he came hurtling towards the fox, the cow in close pursuit. What's in it for me? The sly old fox called back.
Just help me!
The gingerbread man pleaded. The fox took pity on the poor gingerbread man. No one wants to be eaten by a cow. Hop on, he said, and the gingerbread man took a leap of faith onto the fox's back, and the fox slid right into the river, leaving the cow skidding to a halt on the bank.
Ha ha!
The gingerbread man shouted at the cow, jumping up and down on the fox's back.
Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the Gingerbread Man.
The fox suddenly didn't feel so sorry for the gingerbread man, and the sweet smell of ginger, sugar and icing tickled his nose. As he swam across the river, he let his back sink a little lower into the water.
Fox!
The gingerbread man warned.
My toes are getting wet.
Oh dear, the fox said. Perhaps you should seek higher ground. Try my neck. The gingerbread man climbed up onto the fox's neck, but soon this seemed to be sinking lower into the water too.
Fox!
The gingerbread man panicked.
It's happening again. I'm going to be soaked soon.
Oh dear, the fox said again. Why don't you try my head? They were so very nearly at the other side of the river, but the gingerbread man did as the fox suggested. Without warning, the fox flicked up his head, sending the gingerbread man flying through the air, soaring higher and higher into the sky, and then tumbling, tumbling, tumbling back down towards the fox's open jaws.
Fox!
The gingerbread man shouted.
You betrayed me.
But there was nothing he could do to slow his descent. He shouted,
I should never have been so cocky and rude. This is what I get.
Suddenly, a wrinkled old hand reached out and snatched him from the air. It was the old woman. She had been worried about him and had followed him all this way. You've been very naughty, she scolded him, holding him up to her face.
I know,
he said, hanging his head.
I'm sorry.
She said, looking him up and down. Well, shall we go home? If you promise to be good, I promise not to eat you.
Yes, please,
he said. And so the old woman and the gingerbread man went back to the cottage together. The gingerbread man was mostly very good, and the old woman was no longer lonely, and they lived happily ever after. The Little Mermaid. This story begins with a secret. Not just any secret, but a secret world hidden from memory in the depths of the ocean. Beyond the strange fish and dangerous floating lights of the midnight deep, beyond the underwater volcanoes and beyond the shipwrecks, further still, there is a kingdom full of bright and beautiful creatures. The most beautiful of all of them were the merfolk. Mermen and mermaids, whose heads, shoulders, arms and chests were just like yours and mine. But where our bodies become legs, the merfolk had tails. Long, flowing, elegant tails with sparkling scales and silken fins that allowed them to glide gracefully through the water, or if they so chose, power through the water faster than a sailfish. These magical creatures were ruled by a kind and strong king who lived in a great underwater palace with his 5 daughters. They lived happy and free, and they wanted for nothing. It was a perfect world, untouched by greed or pollution or war. The merfolk had never even heard of such things. There was just one rule that the merfolk all obeyed. Never, never go to the surface. The king would not allow it, for he knew the dangers that lurked up there. This was an easy rule to follow, as there was no good reason to go there. The merfolk had everything they needed. There was one mermaid, though. One mermaid who was a little more curious, a little more adventurous, a little more headstrong than the others. The Little Mermaid. She just happened to also be the king's youngest daughter. From just a mer child, the Little Mermaid had always liked to explore the furthest reaches of the kingdom, places she knew she shouldn't go, but she just couldn't help it. Something inside her told her there was more, and she had to know. And as she grew older and discovered more, she found that the more questions that were answered, the more she had to ask. On the day our story really begins, the Little Mermaid decided she could wait no longer. So she snuck out of the palace and away from the kingdom and up, 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 until her head broke the sparkling surface of the ocean, and she finally breathed fresh air, saw the sky, heard the birds. Her senses were alive, and it was incredible. Suddenly, a shadow fell over her, and, panicking, she dived back under the water as a huge ship came crashing through the waves. Full of more questions, she followed it and climbed up the side to see what she could see. It was full of humans, playing jolly music, dancing, singing, celebrating something. And among them, a handsome prince. She looked into his kind eyes, and the Little Mermaid fell in love, hook, line and sinker. There was no going back down to the Mer Kingdom now. She knew that if she went home, she would never see him again, and her heart would be empty forever. Just then, a storm started to swell, and the waves grew as vast as mountains. Lightning cracked open the sky, and thunder boomed. The wind and spray and waves tossed the ship this way and that, and the ship could not take it. As the ship disappeared beneath the waves, the Little Mermaid searched the lifeboats and the wreckage for the prince, rescuing many sailors as she looked, pushing them towards floating planks or lifeboats, the chaos around them so great they did not notice her scales or long tail. Finally, she spied him, clinging to a barrel that was slowly sinking beneath the waves. She rescued him, taking him to shore and caring for him until a search party came to take him home. He was barely conscious, with enough energy to ask her, "Who are you?" before she dove back beneath the waves to hurry home before she was discovered missing. She tried to go back to her normal life, she truly did, but she couldn't stop thinking about the prince. There was one creature in the kingdom, just one, who might be able to help her, and she knew the dangers, but she sought her out anyway. The Sea Witch. She was beautiful and terrible, with purple eyes and golden teeth. The merfolk knew she could perform great magic, but always at a great price. The Little Mermaid told the Sea Witch everything, and the sea witch told her she could help. The witch would give the little mermaid legs for 3 days, during which she must get the prince to fall in love with her. If she succeeded, she would stay human for the rest of her days. If she failed, the sea witch would keep the little mermaid in her cave for all eternity. All she requested in payment was the little mermaid's voice. The little mermaid could see no other way and couldn't bear a life without the prince, so she said yes, and the dreaded deal was done. "One more thing," the sea witch said. "If you touch seawater in the next 3 days, the spell will be broken, and you will turn back into a mermaid. No seawater," she reminded her. The sea witch gave the little mermaid a potion to drink, which made her fall into a deep, dreamless sleep. She awoke on the beach dressed in human clothes, and under her skirts she found she had legs. Real human legs. She had just about gotten the hang of walking when the prince came walking down the beach. He had walked the beach constantly since his rescue, desperate to find the one who had saved him. The prince took her back to the palace, believing her to be a runaway or lost. She tried to tell him it was her who rescued him from the shipwreck, but without her voice, she could not. He gave her a pen and paper so she could explain where she came from, but it was no use. Mer language was different to human language, and he could not make head nor tail of the squiggles and lines she drew. As time went by, though, it seemed that the little mermaid and the prince might just fall in love anyway. But out of the blue, a woman appeared, claiming to be the one who rescued the prince from the ship, and quickly they seemed to be in love instead. The little mermaid was heartbroken. How could this happen? What could she do? She watched the prince and this mysterious woman together and tried to understand how this could be, when suddenly she saw a flash of purple in the woman's eyes and a spark of gold in her smile, and the little mermaid knew it was the sea witch in disguise. She knew what she must do. She filled a wooden bucket with seawater, careful not to let a single drop touch her skin, and she threw it with all her might at the sea witch. The spell that made the sea witch human was instantly broken, as was the spell that made the prince love her, and enraged, the sea witch dived back into the sea. The prince looked at the little mermaid, and in that moment, everything became clear. She was the one he had been searching for. She had rescued him, and she had been right in front of him all this time. It was her that he really loved. And as that realization hit him, they both glowed with love, and the spell on the little mermaid was broken. She could speak again, and she was to stay a human forever. They were married that very day, and they lived very, very happily ever after. Rapunzel. Once upon a time, there was a witch. She was selfish and mean and spiteful. She didn't like anyone or anything, and she especially didn't like cheerful, happy people. She didn't like it when they laughed or sang. She didn't like it when children played, and most of all, what she absolutely hated was people who were in love with each other. Happy couples, they were just the worst. The one thing the witch didn't hate was her garden. It was a lush green jungle of enormous and perfectly formed fruits and vegetables, surrounded by a high wall. Great spiralling towers of crisp, sweet runner beans, sprawling vines rich with pumpkins and cucumbers, trees overflowing with juicy apples and plums. The garden was her pride and joy, and she used her magic to pull all the goodness from the soil for miles around, to magically ripen the food and make it plump and delicious. Near to the witch lived a young couple. They had a garden of their own and worked hard to tend to it, but the witch's magic was draining their land of every bit of nourishment, and they could barely grow a bean. The man begged the witch for help, but she would not share, even though she had far more than she could ever eat alone. So one night, the man climbed the wall to steal a single juicy lettuce, his wife's favourite. But as he plucked the lettuce from the ground, a bolt of lightning lit the garden, and the witch stood before him with a thunderous look on her face.
"You would steal from me!" she roared.
He fell to his knees and begged for help. The witch thought for a moment and said, "Fine, you may take as much food as you need from the garden, but nothing in this world comes for free. In return for saving your life, you will promise me your firstborn child." The man quickly agreed before snatching the lettuce and running home to his wife. He knew they needed the food, and he would worry about the promise later. Well, later came sooner than he thought, and before long the woman had a beautiful golden-haired baby girl, and they named her Rapunzel. They were so happy, and the man thought his promise to the witch had been forgotten. But no sooner than the baby turned 1, the witch stole her away in the night and locked her up in a tall tower. Rapunzel's life was boring. She had little to do. She drew, she read books, she even learned to cook, but most of all, she liked to sing. Of course, the witch hated it, so Rapunzel made sure she only sang while the witch was away, which was most of the time. One day, a prince passed by the tower. He heard sweet singing and stopped to find where it came from. Spying the tower, he tried to find the door, but couldn't. He tried to climb the tower, but couldn't. He could see the window at the top and knew that the source of the beautiful music was inside, so he stayed and listened a while. He watched, hidden, as the witch returned and the singing stopped. The witch called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair!" and a braid of gleaming golden hair tumbled from the window. The witch grabbed hold and was raised up to the window and disappeared inside. The prince watched and waited for the witch to leave again. Straight away he went to the bottom of the tower and called out the words, and the golden rope of hair was once again tossed to the ground. His heart beating in anticipation, he climbed to the top and came face to face with Rapunzel. She was shocked. No one but the witch had ever climbed her hair to the tower. But she looked into the eyes of the prince and saw the kindness and the hope there, and she dared to dream of freedom and happiness. The prince looked into Rapunzel's eyes, and he knew his life would never be complete without her by his side. For a whole year the prince would visit Rapunzel in her tower. He would tell stories of the world that he had explored, and she would sing for him. He even taught her some new songs from distant lands. She told him how eating from the witch's magical garden her whole life had made her magical hair so long and so strong. But the prince never stayed long, for fear that the witch would find out and hurt him, or even worse, punish Rapunzel. One day, he watched the witch leave as usual and quickly called to Rapunzel to bring him up. He was excited to show her a gift he had made her. It was a rope ladder he had painstakingly made over the year he had fallen in love with her. He had started making it the day they met, and he'd been adding to the length every day until finally it was long enough to reach the ground from her window. Rapunzel was so happy. They decided they would escape together the very next day. Rapunzel couldn't help but sing and dance around her room all that day, and in her happiness she forgot the time, and the witch returned. The witch heard Rapunzel singing a song from a kingdom far away, and knew right away that it was a song she would have no way of knowing, should never have heard before. She flew into a rage and cut Rapunzel's hair. She used the severed golden braid to bring them both to the ground, and she dragged Rapunzel away. The witch took Rapunzel to a distant wasteland and left her there alone, telling her never to return or she would kill the prince. In all of her years in the tower, Rapunzel had become part of the magical garden, and without her, it turned sour. The fruit and vegetables rotted away, and the plants turned to thorns and nettles. The prince saw this and knew straight away that something was wrong. He climbed the magical hair that remained hanging from the window, wanting to help Rapunzel. As he reached the top, he came face to face not with his beloved, but with the witch. She cut the braid, and the prince went tumbling down, scratching his eyes on the thorns and becoming blind. The prince wandered through the land, listening out for Rapunzel's song, and Rapunzel wandered through the wasteland searching for her prince. The witch returned to her garden and found that no matter what she did, she could not return it to the paradise it once was. She used up all of her magic to fight back the thorns until she shriveled into a little grey worm and burrowed into the ground, never to be seen again. Rapunzel and the prince wandered for a year, until finally the prince heard the familiar, beautiful singing that he loved so much. He stumbled towards the sound, calling Rapunzel's name, and fell into her arms. Her tears of happiness fell freely onto his face, and the last seed of magic from the garden fell with them, instantly healing his sight. Together, they returned to the garden, where they found happiness like no other. The garden felt its beloved Rapunzel return, and it became lush and fertile again. They knocked the tower to the ground and built a cottage, where they spent the rest of their days singing and dancing to their heart's content. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this magical story. If you want to come along on more of our adventures, make sure you subscribe to our channel. There's so much more to be discovered. You can start right now by clicking on our channel and picking your next favourite tale. There really is something for everyone, from daring heroes and mischievous creatures to magical lands and secret wonders. And remember, by subscribing, you'll be the first to know when a brand new story is ready to be enjoyed. Let's go.